I'm Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, and you're watching Taped with Rabbi Doug.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight.
But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're gonna watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug. Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about that.
We're here for part 2 at the Illinois Holocaust Memorial Museum and Education Center on Taped with Rabbi Doug. We're going to continue at the museum with our speakers. Today, we are going to hear from President Bill Clinton, along with many other dignitaries. Stay with us here for this very interesting and exciting show on Taped with Rabbi Doug.
Thank you, JB, Ellie, Marion. Thank you for the wonderful talk and for reminding people that you did tell me at the dedication of the Holocaust Museum in Washington that America had to stop the Bosnian genocide. Governor Quinn, Senator Burris, members of Congress and the General Assembly, to all the officers of the Holocaust Museum, Attorney General Madigan, Secretary of State White, Comptroller Hines, Mayor Van Duzen, I'm honored to be in Skokie and honored by the response. And all of you whose gifts, whether they're received memories or cold cash, made today possible. Before I came over, and I've been backstage listening to most of the program, but I got a tour of this magnificent museum. And it strikes me as not only appropriate but necessary that it is both a place of remembrance and learning, or it requires both to truly be able to say never again. Never again, not just for Jews, but for all who suffer and die, simply because of their identities, their religion, their race, their ethnicity, their gender, their sexual orientation, simply because of who they are. People have been dying because of who they are for a very long time. You heard Elie Wiesel say that he used the dedication of the Washington, D.C. Holocaust Memorial to urge me to do something to stop the Bosnian genocide. We did, but only after 250,000 people had died and 2.5 million had been rendered refugees. We acted more quickly in Kosovo, but far too late in Rwanda, where 10% of the country was slaughtered, mostly by machetes, in just 90 days. I think it's important that this place of remembrance and learning is here. Not only because of what happened in Skokie 3 decades ago, but because it is in the heartland of the country. We don't want the only people remembering and learning to be in Washington, New York, and Los Angeles. The heartland of America needs to know the same thing. I was astonished by the beauty of the buildings, the power of the artifacts, the oral histories, and the wonderful historical record. Even though I've been to Yad Vashem 3 or 4 times and been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington twice and was there when we opened the one in New York City and have toured the offices of the Shoah Foundation, I still learn something in your place today. There is always more to learn. It struck me as particularly significant that this will be one of the last, if not the very last, museum to be built in the United States with the direct memories and participation of survivors. Still, as long as this museum stands, every person who enters its doors will be enlightened and empowered by those direct memories. It's one of the reasons I am so grateful to my friend Steven Spielberg for the work he's done with the Shoah Foundation, collecting as many of them from around the world as possible before it's too late. The Holocaust literally transformed how people thought about the 20th century. It dashed forever the Enlightenment dream that evil could somehow be permanently banished by reason. It proved that the struggle against the baser tendencies of human nature must be fought and contained in every generation. For deep within every person, in different ways, the forces of light and darkness do battle. When the darker forces prevail, the capacity for evil arises. That must always be remembered and always opposed. That's why the mission of the museum to teach visitors about other genocides, such as those in Darfur, Rwanda, Cambodia, and elsewhere, is so profoundly important. We're now more than a half-century past the Holocaust, living in history's most interdependent age, in which divorcing ourselves from the problems of other people is neither a moral nor a practical option. We have a heavy obligation to prevent future genocides, to keep others from dying before their time. As 2 of my former cabinet secretaries, Madeleine Albright and Bill Cohen, wrote in their recently released Genocide Prevention Task Force report, we must honor the memory of past victims by encouraging future action. Preventing genocide is possible, and striving to do so is imperative. It is not enough simply to refrain from doing evil. We must seek it out, stand against it, and do our part to build a more just and decent world, where no one faces death or persecution. Simply because of who they are, how they worship, what their gender is, whom they love. Our 21st century has its own unique challenges arising directly from our interdependence. And they're enough to keep us busy without our being diverted into the foolishness of destruction by identity. Think of the problems that are directly rooted in our interdependence. Significant inequalities in incomes, education and healthcare. Instability from terror, organized crime, narco-trafficking, weapons of mass destruction, and as we all now know, over-leveraged and unregulated financial markets around the world. The utter unsustainability of the way we use energy in the face of climate change. All these things need to be dealt with on the merits because they challenge livelihoods and threaten lives. But it is very important to remember, though I agree with Ellie that no one can answer fully the question, why did this happen? We know that the more people are stressed out by challenges to their own identity and their own security, the more fertile ground is laid for future identity-based violence. Still, we know conditions alone did not create the Holocaust. The capacity for evil has to be stirred. The most ripe targets for the stirring are masses of people who are insecure. Insecure psychologically, insecure financially, insecure politically. They are more vulnerable to false claims by power mongers. The Jews were targeted by Hitler to a group of Germans who were humiliated by their defeat in World War I, by the harsh peace thereafter, by a badly broken economy in the Weimar Republic. They were told that they were a master race, held back by the pollution of the Jews and the Gypsies and the gays and anybody else who disagreed with Hitler. They were told that only by ridding their society of their impurities could they rise to their clear historical destiny. Many years later, here in Skokie, the neo-Nazis, if you really looked at them, and neo-Nazi groups in Europe and other hate groups around the world, they basically were made up of angry, uncertain, insecure people looking for someone else to blame, cultivating in their own minds a phony victimhood to justify hurting others. Genocide is invariably the offspring of a marriage between insecure reasons, insecure people, and ruthless demagogues. Let's take one I know quite a lot about, Rwanda, where I now work with my foundation to fight AIDS and help people make a living and increase their incomes. The Tutsis and their Hutu sympathizers were butchered by the hundreds of thousands, about 800,000 of them in just 90 days. They were killed, as I said, mostly by machetes, by people run amok, not only in Kigali, the capital, but throughout the country where there was no formal resistance, because the people were convinced to turn against the Tutsis, representing only 15% of the population of the country. How could they have threatened it? But they were disproportionately successful in business and in academia and politics. Sound familiar? And the rank and file Hutu citizens were told, oh, the Tutsis are coming after you now. They're going to try to take over everything. They're going to try to dominate you. They're going to kill and jail people arbitrarily. You better strike back first. And so the whirlwind was reaped. The good news is it doesn't have to end there. After the perpetrators of genocide were defeated by Rwandans, Rwanda rose above its differences to build a shared society, to share the government, to share the bounty of land. Families who were on both sides of the divide now live side by side in reconciliation villages where you can actually get a free piece of land to build a house, but only if you agree to live next door to someone who was on the other side. I went back to Rwanda for the first time after I left the White House, and I'll never forget it. I saw two women holding hands. One woman, a Tutsi, had lost her brother and father. Her next door neighbor, whom she had come to love, had a husband in prison awaiting war crimes trial for being one of the major perpetrators of the genocide. I met a young Hutu who had been involved in the killing and had fled to the Congo. And I asked him why he had come home. He said, because my president said I was needed. And if I was not a leader, I would be punished by my fellow townspeople. So he came back and agreed to live next to a member of the other ethnic group, and he told the truth to a town reconciliation council, and they gave him an atonement assignment for 2 years. And he was made whole with his fellow Rwandans. I'll never forget, this is not easy. But I went to Rwanda as president, and I apologized to them because I did not get involved there until all we could do was to save people in the camps. And 10% of the people were already dead. And I had 6 survivors with me. They told stories, not all together, unlike the stories you can see on your tour here. But one was particularly amazing. A beautiful woman in a resplendent, bright-colored dress of the African Lake Country, extremely dignified with no visible scars, told me that she had been hacked on the back by a machete and was bleeding profusely around her spine and had been left for dead after their next-door neighbors had sold them out. He said, our children played together, we had holiday meals together, we thought we were friends, but they were afraid when the butchers came, and they said, where are the Tutsis? They sold us out. She said, I awoke in a sea of my own blood to see my husband and 6 children lying dead around me. And I screamed out in anger to God that I had been spared. And then I realized I must have been spared for a reason. And it could not be something as mean as vengeance. So I do what I can to help us begin again. She took orphan children from all ethnic groups and raised them until they could be put in permanent families. There's a woman that runs a basket weaving cooperative in Rwanda who lost 7 of her 10 children in the genocide, and her husband. Only the 3 oldest children survived because they were in the military and off somewhere when all the killing started. One day, a 26-year-old man who worked in her basket weaving cooperative, which contained Hutus and Tutsis, came to see her and broke down in tears. He said, you've been so good to me, I can't stay here any longer, I can't do this. I have to confess, I killed one of your children. And I know you have a son in the army still. If you want him to come and kill me, I will understand and I will stay here until he comes for your justice. And this woman looked at him and said, what good would that do? I forgive you. Get up and go back to work. How many of us could do that? What was it about her identity that freed her to do that? What made Nelson Mandela believe he could actually have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission after all the terrible things that had happened? That he could put the leaders of all the apartheid parties in his government after all the terrible things that had happened? Because he knew that once you stop the worst, you have to somehow go about finding the best in everyone who's still left. That's the real challenge facing so many places today. I got here in time to see Hillary's videotape, and she called me right before I left our home today because she and President Obama are down in Trinidad at the Summit of the Americas. And I told her, I said, remember now, I'm going to this Holocaust Museum. She said, I know, tell them I said hello. And I said, so if you think you can't make up with Hugo Chavez and those other guys, that's a tea party compared. We're laughing, but I'm serious. We all get so puffed up with our own specialness that our negative identities trump our positive ones. But think of the challenges facing Israel today, and what is at the root of them? The Iranian nuclear program. Are we supposed to take Ahmadinejad seriously when he has a meeting that's designed to call into question the Holocaust, which you have so powerfully documented? And if not, what are you supposed to do about it? Can Israel, as the new Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, wants to do, actually make some progress on peace with Syria after all they've done to empower the Iranian mischief through their agents? Most important of all, how can you keep moving toward peace with the Palestinians who still believe in the promise of peace? Remember, the Israeli government recently showered compliments on the Palestinian government in the West Bank because of its conduct during the Gaza operations, and what a good job they did in preserving security. But the question is, what happens now? The Palestinians had a prime minister who gave them the first government they've had, which was both competent and strong and honest. In the past, those of you who are familiar with it know we've had governments that were competent and strong but not honest, and governments that were honest but not competent and strong. They actually had the whole shooting match, and they performed superbly on the security front. But the West Bank Palestinians, the Fatah movement, they gave up violence, and all they have left is economics and politics. What is Israel to do? The Hamas strategy is to make certain that Israel will have an endless list of political reasons never to give political and economic progress, by just having enough violence always to take their eye off the ball. What do you do when you're trying to prevent the conditions which could create a future genocide for the survivors of the last one, and you're trying to deal in good faith with the legitimate claims of people who have reached out the olive branch, and the mischief maker believes he can control your policy? That is the dilemma facing us today. We cannot let the terrorists who really want everything to go straight to hell and a new conflagration prevail. Remember, the population balance is tilting against the Israeli Jews. Poverty is rising, and those rockets are notoriously inaccurate today, but in some not too distant tomorrow will have the equivalent of GPS positioning on them. I say all this because as a Christian, I honestly believe God meant for Jews to have a permanent home in the Holy Land. After all the genocide and the endless persecutions suffered in the diaspora everywhere. After the uprooting of the Babylonian captivity and the horrible violence wreaked on Jews, not Arab Muslims, by the Christian soldiers of the First Crusade who got to Jerusalem and torched a synagogue with 300 men, women, and children in it. The Jews have earned the right to live in peace with their neighbors. How will you sort this through? I didn't come to offer the answers today, but to say one part of it has to be in not only the memory, but the education that will take place in places like this, and that every one of us can be a part of. The Torah says, he who turns away from a stranger might as well turn away from the Most High God. My Christian New Testament says the greatest of all commandments is to love the Lord with all your mind and heart. And the second is, quote, like unto it, to love your neighbor as yourself. The Quran says Allah put different peoples on the earth, not that they might despise one another, but that they might come to know one another and learn from one another. That's one of those surahs I think our friends in Iran sometimes forget to read. The Dhammapada of the Buddha says no one is fully human until he feels the arrow piercing another's skin as if it had entered his own body. The lesson of this museum, the debt we owe to those who died and to those who survived and bravely told their own stories here. The debt we owe to those who will come after us is pretty simple. We must teach them, our children, that there can be no mind without heart, no passion without soul, no learning without wisdom, and no conviction without action. Thank you, and God bless you.
I'm here with Governor Quinn, and we're here at the opening of the Holocaust Museum. Governor Quinn, what do you think this means for the state of Illinois in just a couple of sentences?
I think it's very important not only for the people of Illinois, but the people of America and the people of planet Earth. That it's our duty on Earth to never forget, to always remember, to honor the lives of those who were killed in the Holocaust, and to educate our children and all on planet Earth of the importance of never again. And education is a fundamental part of the Holocaust Museum and Education Center that's right here in Illinois, the land of Lincoln.
I wish you much success, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
That's it for today, but we're going to be back here at the Illinois Holocaust Memorial Museum, so don't go away. We hope to see you every week at this time. Remember, our website is www.tvrabbi.com, or if you want to email us, info@tvrabbi.com. Remember, we're on every week at this time, so hope to see you next time right here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Shalom, everybody.
Stay tuned next time for part 3. This has been a Taped with Rabbi Doug production.